the New Hebrides, the invasion fleets of Operation Galvanic struck at the Gilbert Islands of Makin and Tarawa. After heavy fighting, the islands were secured on November the 23rd. In January 1944, another amphibious force from Hawaii launched Operation Flintlock, the invasion of the Marshall Islands. On Kwajalein and Eniwetok, the Japanese fought to the last, but by the 23rd of February, the islands had been captured. American carrier-launched aircraft also obliterated the massive Japanese air and naval base on Truk in the Carolines. The next major American objectives were the islands of the Mariana Chain. In particular, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The Saipan invasion armada, carrying 127,000 troops, was supported by an awesome array of naval might. In company sailed a force of 13 escort carriers, 7 battleships, and 17 cruisers. Nearby was the Pacific Fleet's main striking force with 7 new battleships, 13 cruisers, 69 destroyers, and 15 fast aircraft carriers. In spite of the shattering bombardment from the heavy guns of the American warships and the determination of the amphibious assault, the Marines quickly found themselves facing real difficulty in getting off the beaches. The Japanese commanded the heights and launched fierce counterattacks. There was also another, even more deadly threat from the sea. The Japanese had anticipated the Mariana landings, and a powerful fleet of carriers, battleships and cruisers began to implement Operation Argo, a massive counterstroke that would destroy the American carrier fleet. The result was the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Starting at 0830 on June the 19th, the Japanese carriers launched 4 successive waves of strike aircraft. However, unlike the Japanese, the Americans had efficient radar, and the attackers were detected in plenty of time. The American carriers scrambled hundreds of fighters to meet them. In a series of savage battles, 240 Japanese aircraft were shot down for the loss of only 29 American planes. Already, American submarines had sunk 2 Japanese carriers, and the day after the Great Air Battle, an American carrier strike sank another. In all, Japanese aircraft losses came to 480 planes, along with most of their crews. With the American victory in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the conquest of the Marianas was a foregone conclusion. There was still bitter fighting to come, but by August the 12th, Saipan and the neighboring islands of Tinian and Guam had been cleared, and the Marianas were in American hands. Now the question for US planners was where along the still vast perimeter of the Japanese Empire should the United States strike next. Although the American President Franklin D. Roosevelt took the closest interest in the conduct of the war, alone amongst the leaders of the great powers, he never thought of himself as a strategist. He was known for asking penetrating questions, but usually he followed the advice of his Joint Chiefs of Staff. However, in 1942, he had insisted on reinforcements being sent to the battle for Guadalcanal, and now, in the summer of 1944, he was about to intervene once again. Throughout the campaigns on New Guinea and the Marianas, the Joint Chiefs had been divided on the question of where the next attacks should be. Roosevelt was getting conflicting advice from all sides. On July the 21st, the President took matters into his own hands. He traveled to Hawaii to meet with the two men who actually ran the war in the Pacific. Chester Nimitz, commanding Central Pacific Operations, and Douglas MacArthur, commander in the Southwestern Pacific. Faced with the choice between MacArthur's desire to drive the Japanese out of the Philippines and Nimitz's preference for bypassing most of the islands and striking at Formosa, Roosevelt backed MacArthur. The general had used the kind of arguments with which Roosevelt instinctively sympathized. Above all, the political reasons for taking the islands, from which America had been driven at the start of the war. Although others would have to be convinced, the President's support for MacArthur's plan made it almost certain that America's next major campaign would be to expel the Japanese from the Philippines. On July the 18th, 1944, after the disastrous defeats in the Marianas and the Philippine Sea, the government of Hideki Tojo resigned, and Lieutenant General Kuniaki Koizo became Japanese Prime Minister. Koizo was a retired Army counterintelligence officer and a hardline nationalist backed by the Army faction. Within Japanese ruling circles, a peace party had tried to win the premiership for itself, but had been too weak to do so. Although it did succeed in getting the appointment of Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai as Navy Minister and, in practice, Vice Premier. However, even with influential backers, Yonai could make little headway. The Japanese public had been told that the empire was winning the war, and the hardliners would not hesitate to arrest or assassinate anyone who openly advocated peace. Privately, Koizo doubted that Japan could hold out against the growing might of the United States. Nevertheless, he supported the military faction who demanded one last chance to improve Japan's bargaining position by winning a major victory. Under Koizo, creating an effective defense would be given the highest priority. But an important part of that defense would be to strike a major blow against the Americans, preferably a blow that destroyed an entire US invasion force.